So today is a Black historical event here at St. John Douglas College. We're recording today the psychology of racism. Today's date is 1/11/12, according to the European time. Today we're going to, first of all, talk about some solutions to psychology of racism that I put on the board. Now, I wrote it like this here to show how to be able to use the term blackologically speaking. I did this last week. I figured I'd do it again today because we may have folks who were not here last week. So, psychologically speaking, your intelligence is worthless unless you actively participate strongly and exercise your talents and gifts. Let your light shine. Deal with blackologically. You can also write it by itself. Blackologically, as black people, we can never be number one with anyone else until we are number one with ourselves. The cultural therapy that we're doing today is Dr. Frances Wilson. You may have some work on her from last week. Those who were here last week, we listened to the, we watched the video, and then we wrote down one or two things. One thing that in the video that was inspiring to us and for yourself, and then we discussed that. We're going to basically do the same thing again this week. So how are you all doing with your term papers? You finished? All right, okay. Last week, we put on the board a outline, because you want to outline with that, with your term paper. The outline is going to look something like this. Purpose. See it, always come out. One. Purpose. Then we're going to have introduction. Body. You're going to have page numbers. And number the pages. Like 1, 3, 6. Conclusion. Say 9. Reference. Reference. Okay. Then you're going to have a cover page. Something like this. Title. Now, this is not necessarily the title. This is just an example. Your name, date, what's going to look like.
You want it in that order? to have it.
No, it doesn't have to exactly be like mine. Okay. Keep going. And I should say, instructor.
Yeah. Me, you know who you are.
That's right.
Psychologist. That's it. Well,
It's just so bad. Just right over. Okay. So we're doing fine. Everybody's now. If you want to present, you need to. If you're not going to present your paper, you should have some kind of video or something, because not presenting will affect your grade. Now you can do a cultural therapy video like I have of any one of the names of. I gave a list of individuals, or you can, whoever you're doing your research on, you can get a documentary on that, and be ready to answer questions from the documentary if you do the documentary right, like that, right there. I believe Chevron does have one from last semester. Not, see, I got the here. Yes, here they are. You can do a video, or you can present your paper. Do your presentation. Be ready to answer questions when you present your paper, as well as when you do your cultural therapy video.
okay.
And now, you don't have to footnote or endnote as long as you have reference and bibliography. If you do footnote and endnote, that's okay. All right? So I think we're beginning in the last week in this month, January, we're going to start doing presentations, because class is February. According to here, February 25th. So we want to try to get all of them in for all our presentations.
And that's with the January.
Yes, yeah, be prepared to start making presentations. Who you want to present it on, or your documentary. You need a copy for you and a copy for me. All right. On your paper and or your documentary. Okay. Also, when you do the cultural therapies, you get a copy, I get a copy. All right. Hand it in unless you got a copy for yourself too. All right. Now we are. Now, any current events that you all would like to discuss? First of all, the president is always a good one to discuss how the psychology of racism is affecting him in his term as president, the way that the Republican Party is trying to come up with someone to run against him. I believe that the president is using all of his agencies to help him to be able to discredit anybody that doesn't have all of their dominoes in order. If you're running for office and you don't have it together, President Obama is known for counseling you out because you didn't do what you're supposed to have done And so far, that looks pretty much like that is what's going on with the political scene. Have you seen or felt any psychology of racism in your daily activities, such as at school, work, on the television, purpose of the class is so that we would be able to distinguish racism from the effects of racism? It's one of the things that we want to be able to do as scholars in learning about the psychology of racism. We want to be able to know when you see racism.
Yes, this lady works for white lady. She just thinks she can walk up to, well, she tried to with me. She just walked up to me and started talking, and then she don't have to acknowledge me. Or if I'm walking down the hallway, she'll just walk behind me and start asking me questions. And one day she did it, and I said, "Excuse me, who are you talking to?" She was like, "You." I said, "Well, my name is Chevion or Miss Stewart. You can use it, and then you can talk to me." I said, "You can't just walk behind me and think I'm going to listen to you."
Interesting, interesting.
And at the beginning of the school year, I was new to the school. She, talked kind of as if she was, I don't know, a king or queen or something. Like she would try to say, there's a certain way that we do buses. And I asked them, and they just said we take the children off the bus. So when I went to the bus and got the children off, she came running behind me and was like, "No, that's not the way you do it. We only take the first 5." I said, "Well, when I asked you how to do it, you told me to take them off, so that's what I did. Next time you need to be a little more clear with me."
Now, Chevion, you're a teacher?
I'm a teacher's assistant.
A teacher's assistant. Teacher. Okay.
Yes, I'll be a teacher next year.
And what school do you
I'm at Chapel Forge. It's a special education center at Bowie. Excellent.
Good story. We've been culturally conditioned to respond to the Euro-American just by sight alone. So as a result, they think just because they're in our environment that we're supposed to respond to them, whether they speak to us or not. So that's an example of how the psychology of racism works.
And what I have to share is from my last position as job coach, we work with people with disabilities of all ages. But I found to be very disturbing the supervision, my supervisors, they were on another level of consciousness than some of us were. I just could not relate to some of them. They were all brainwashed, it seemed to me. They had all that information that came from the white, the European people. It came from them, and they were being fair with people who didn't have the degree. So they weren't, instead of asking you, do you know a thing on how things done, they'll say, "No, this is how it's done. We don't do it like that. I told you twice or 2 or 3 times." So right then and there, that's not the correct way to talk to me. So,
Another example of how the Euro-American thinks that we're here specifically to
do their bidding.
do their bidding, whatever they want done. We've been in this land now for over 400 years, according to their research. But the black scholars have said we were here even before the European came, because in Mexico there are the Olmec kids. Those are examples of the proof that before the European came to this land, we were here as well. And the black scholars have seen that black scholars have went about the world educating the world on culture. That the reason why there's culture in the world is because our ancestors went traveling voyages traveled the ocean and they navigated their way to this land, and as a result, culture was spread throughout the world, language, how to speak, so forth, and so on. But because of the trials and tribulations of captivity and enslavement, the Europeans think that they have the right to hold over our heads some type of ownership.
Make decisions for us, because we could really make our own.
Right.
ourselves.
And this is how white supremacy racism works. It works how in a way that is according to the privilege distribution scale, an advantage for the Euro-American. And so as a result, we have to be conscious of it. And we should, we also should bring it to their attention as well. Why do you address me that way? Because what gives you the right to address me that way? Why do you think that? Because from my research and studies, it lets me know that this is white supremacy racism. And this is not the time for it. We are too intelligent today to fall for all the things that we fell for in the past. We have to, and sometimes you may not say anything, but according to Dr. Wilson, when you don't talk about it, then that's the problem. When we just let it happen and go on and not do anything, then white supremacy racism continues to grow, continues to stay. So what we want to be able to do is to confront it each and every time that we can do that.
When there's confrontation, that's confrontation. It really just means to confront and talk to someone about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a matter of intelligence.
Yeah.
This is the intelligent thing. If you don't use your intelligence, somebody else will use it against you. I had a professor, he used to always say, know your strengths and know your weaknesses. Because if you don't, somebody will take them and use them against you. And so since we've been evolving from captivity and enslavement, there has really never been a mechanism to undo this psychology of racism until relatively recent, with scholars like Dr. Wilson, Malefia Asante, John Henry Clark, then Carter G. Woodson. You could, name names from now until tomorrow. But until we act on the knowledge that was given to us, the blueprint, or as the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association says, the black print, as a way that information was left to us to be able to use in order to deal with the challenges of the psychology of racism. Go into that.
Came down with something yesterday.
We're discussing Dr. Wilson and the psychology of racism. Today we're recording as well. We want to be able to provide our class lectures and our discussions so that those who are not able to make it to class, we can put it on the internet. We can make it accessible on our website. So now, how are you coming with your paper?
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Let's see where we at now. Contemporary issues. Now we want to be able to know, like, the chronology of racism, the origin of how it came to be. You want to go to your computers, type in the computer the origin of racism. We were provided with documentation on the origin of racism, which discussed the origin of racism in 1935, and comes out of Germany during the concentration camps, where Jews were in concentration camps, and they came up with the term racism. So you want to go to your computer, type that in there, get that information, so you will have knowledge of it, because for someone studying the psychology of racism, you want to know the origin of racism.
Who is this Dr. Wilhelm Wentz? And that's someone else.
What does it say right there? Read that.
Oh, okay. The field of study of psychology was truly born when William Wentz established the first experimental psychology lab in Littleton, Germany in 1879.
Okay. That was the definition of psychology. There's also another paper that deals with the origin of racism.
Okay.
That's it. You type in your computer, it'll come up. And then you'll have information on the origin. Again, in Nazi Germany in the concentration camps, that's when they begin to use the term. If you go through it, you'll probably find it. If you keep going through there, you'll find it. And if you don't have one, then I'll provide you with one.
Just one of the questions that I think I missed.
The origin of racism. And once again, we want to get all of our cultural therapies in, so that we can have time to concentrate on on your term papers. Once again, the use of the word blackological and blackologically speaking is on the board to show the usage. If you can come up with another way to use it, please do so. Let me know, because all new ideas in the field of blackology is welcome. Also, you want to be able to speak on blackology. You want to know the meaning of the word blackology. So if someone asks you, you can be able to give some definition or some response.
Okay.
So go to the web page, click on the web page. If you do it every day, by the time you come to class next week, you'll be able to say what blackology is. Why blackology? Because the same thing as Dr. Wells's CREST theory. It is a solution to the problems that we have because of the psychology of racism. We're dealing with solutions, and blackology is a solution to the psychology of racism. We want to be able to discuss that. Now we're going to go to the lecture. This is Dr. Wilson again, and she's with. Go to the restroom. Go to the restroom. Anybody else want to go to the restroom? Now, psychologically speaking, I refuse to accept the ideal that the presence of urological scholars makes the black scholar morally incapable of reaching up for the black knowledge that forever confronts us. In the research of blackology, I realized that black people really didn't have a perspective that they could talk from. They really didn't have a way to address their cultural perspective. So I came up with the term blackological, which means of, from, by, for, and about the logic of the experiences of black people and their culture. Without being able to speak from a perspective that was ours, we were basically talking from a sociological, psychological, or anthropological, basically from the neurological fields. As a result, we were seeing the world through the eyes of the Europeans. Because, well, that's what we were culturally conditioned to do. Psychology, sociology is close to 200 years old. Invented primarily around the time that captivity was coming to an end. So as a result, we had to take on everything that they gave us. The Negro culture bought everything lock, stock, and barrel. They didn't even question it. The same concept that is used in biblical scripture in accepting religion was the same concept that was forced upon our people, and that was you learn everything, we give you no advance or fuss about it, and you don't ask any questions. As a result of that, we bought everything lock, stock, and barrel.
Right.
Did you want to say something?
Oh, no.
So, we bought everything lock, stock, and barrel. As a result, we were miseducated because we were taught that our people didn't have any history. They hadn't built anything. They hadn't done anything, so that justified captivity and enslavement. For the most part, we were seen as inhumane, not even as human beings. So now the psychology of racism was even in place before they came up with the term psychology, because it was a systematical way of thinking, which was induced based on, for lack of a better word, traditions, the way things were done according to the slaveocracy. And after a time, they discontinued the slave trade because they realized there was a problem with bringing people from Africa who had been freed and placing them into the slave population.
Right.
You would have lots of revolts, running away.
The people that weren't supposed to be slaves or enslaved, they knew they should have their freedom. But Europeans also felt that we weren't, like you said, we weren't a human being, like an ox or a horse or something like, animals, just to keep us in line. That's another thing that really bothered me about the reading. They never wanted us to read, to have that knowledge at all, any kind of knowledge from the books. And some of our people used to sneak around and hide to read books that they had gotten from maybe inside the house or maybe along the way.
Absolutely.
But they always look for their knowledge.
That's right. Well, they see, reading, according to Frederick Douglass, reading was so important because he wrote that the slave owners didn't want you to read because if you could read, they could no longer keep you a slave. So as a result, people could get killed if they knew they could read. And the ones who taught them to read, they would suffer severe punishments as well. So reading was almost like
it was taboo.
it was a good term, taboo.
Yeah.
That's a good term, taboo. So
There were so many people back there, black African American people that really wanted to know these things, to have certain little meetings at night at different places, to, have some neighbors like that could read, give us some of those answers. When I look back at that, I think, people take the knowledge down and learning and all that for granted. Back in those days, they would do almost anything so they could learn. Just read a word, do not treat rules theologically in Arabic religion, something, anything.
Can you imagine learning how to read and you read the scripture in the Bible that said everybody was equal and nobody was any better than the other and you were a slave? That would cause confusion.
It would cause a lot of confusion.
So, under the psychology of racism, that couldn't be done. They had to discontinue that. So, we're going to now do a documentary. Dr. Prince as well.
Try to test for it now. So that I have a rule. No black woman under the conditions of white supremacy
Also, everybody
should have
write
a
down
child
at least
before she's
2
30.
things.
No black male should become a father until he's 35. No more than 2 children, no closer together than 3 years apart. You see, now what am I doing? See, the white supremacy dynamic is not only putting the black male in check, but it is to inferiorize the behavioral function in order to hold an oppression, and in order to have that sense of look at them and I'm superior to them. I really feel genetically inadequate, but I get a psychological kick by seeing them in a very degraded state. You see, and so the counter move is to understand what this dynamic is all about. I mean, just like if you're in a sailboat and you want to get to a particular point on the other side of the river, you have to know the current of the wind and the current of the river, and you tack against that force to get to the point where you want to go. And so I'm saying that as political, like at this point in time, black people say, well, politics is going to the polls and voting. That is, politics is the power relations between people. You see, but everything you do is an aspect of expression of power or powerlessness. And so black people need to understand that it is a very critical and important part of black politics to bring to a screeching halt the inferiorization of black people brought on by white supremacy but carried out through the dynamic of PsycRacism.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think this can be accomplished through your, quote, Democratic and Republican parties?
Well, we're not
do you see these go ahead.
I mean, well, no, because you see these parties, Republican Party, Democratic Party, I say that these are parties, that are under the white supremacy dynamic. And they are fundamentally about white genetic survival.
Dr. Wilson, someone said that you have Brown, who's chairman of the Democratic Party.
Well, you see, but it's like in psychiatry, I have to look for the bottom line. You have to make algebraic sums. You don't just look at one number. You have to look at the pluses, and you have to look at the minuses, and you have to come up with an algebraic sum. Mm-hmm. And so the fact of, one Ron Brown does not make. You see, just like, one Abraham Lincoln doesn't, nullify the use of Willie Horton. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, those parties, and I'm not, I believe that black people should enter the so-called Democratic Party and the Republican Party to teach justice, not to ask for anything. You see, because asking gives me something when the person that you are functioning with say, well, wait a minute, I got to survive genetically. If I give you something that might empower you to cause my genetic annihilation, so I can't. You see, so I say that black people should enter the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and enter anything else that they want in order to talk about justice and to educate. Mm-hmm. You see, but you don't count on that. Yeah. You don't depend on that. That you depend on. You see, just like basketball, football, or, you have to have tactics and strategy for, you see, your survival. And ultimately, what I'm talking about is bring justice to the planet Earth. You see, the vast majority of the people on the planet are non-white people. And it's an abomination that all of those people should be in a state of poverty and uneducated and not highly developed. And so it's about bringing justice to the planet so we can have peace. For example, you have, people classify themselves as white, and they talk about the arms race and all the armaments and all the billions and trillions of dollars that are being spent for weapons. You see, but if, you know, you just talk about the white elderly struggling to, you know, make ends meet. You see, or the white children that need to be educated. Well, we can't, you know, educate you because we've got to spend this money on armaments. Those armaments are to maintain white supremacy. All those weapons surround all the non-white people on the planet. You see, that old game about it's a capitalist versus a communist. Everybody sees, well, that's, you know, obviously, that's not real.
Well, and what do black soldiers in the military put it on the chessboard?
Well, they're, you know, you call them pawns, you know, being used by the other side. I mean, the non-white people are used to, you know, to the extent that they are, you know, my father fought in a war. And I could say the Second World War was about, you know, which white brother is going to have the control of what. But the bottom line was that all those black soldiers did not, you know, achieve equality as a result of fighting in that war. And so we just have to understand.
Well, what about the notion of the world war, and the whole world was not involved in the war? Either war.
Wait,
The
what about?
notion that they call it the World War. World War I, World War II. But everybody in the world was fighting.
Well, large numbers of people in the world. These people were brought into the war. There's the World War I, World War II, and who's going to have control of what group of non-white people? Large numbers of the world is divided up.
Well, I want you to take me to your office stuff without not charging me anything. This question again about the impact that white supremacy power is having on black children, because you're in the area of child psychiatry, and adults. What do you see in your, what are the problems that you see originating out of it?
Well, I was talking about the destruction of a positive image of self that is developed in black children simply by looking at television or reading books. You see, where they don't see their image and the enhancement of their image. That's critical for brain-computer function. You see, if I'm trained not to love and deeply regard myself, then my functioning is being cut in half. The attack on the black male under white supremacy, I say, is a major reason for the destructive relationships that very often go on between black male and female. You see, it's like divide and conquer. You see, you can make a man not get along with his wife by refusing to promote him on a job. I mean, that can happen with a white man. You see, he isn't advancing on a job and he starts feeling bad about himself, and so he goes home and kicks his dog and argues with his wife. You see, because his sense of self.
But most of us will just look at that particular microcosm of this woman and this man, and say that, you know, what's wrong with him?
Exactly.
Or what's wrong with her?
Exactly.
And not be able to look.
Well, we're trained in that way. You see, I mean, white supremacy, I mean, you know, the white side of the chessboard tells the black side, now this is a strategy that I want to use to defeat you. No. You see, if the black side doesn't, you know, perceive it or decode it, then tough luck. So white supremacy never talks about it. White supremacy says, this is a democracy, everybody is equal, da-da-da-da. You see, but that's not the dynamic that is actually being carried out. Whereas if you taught children in the first grade, this is a white supremacy state. This is the way that white supremacy functions. White supremacy has a goal objective to inferiorize non-white people. We want you to understand this, boys and girls. You see, if that was taught, then, wait a minute, I'm not going to be inferiorized. I'm going to stay in school 10 hours a day. You see? So that's, you know, that's not taught. So people are not taught that. I can tell people in my office very often, male and female, black people, 90% of what happens in your marital relationship is determined by white supremacy. To the degree that you increase your knowledge and understanding of what white supremacy is about, you improve the relationship between the two of you.
briefly, once again, how does white supremacy power reach into that home, that African American home?
Well, I think, again, by attacking the father, the primary breadwinner, you see, you control the housing that is available, you control the health care that is available, you see, by paying a person a substantially low wage, or by comparison. You see, you can raise all kinds of havoc. You can raise havoc by having the black female able to advance on a job at a faster rate than her male counterpart. Do you see, that raises all kinds of havoc in a system that says, well, the male is supposed to be the head of the household.
And when you look at the African situation where the family is concerned, you have to say that this is something that has been imposed on us because the family was not like it is.
Exactly. You see, we would do well to say we don't have families. I think we have survival units. Under white supremacy, the family has been destroyed by the dynamic of white supremacy. And at the same time I'm saying that it is our responsibility as black people to decode in detail how white supremacy carries out its destructive dynamic and then counter play against it. And I mean very seriously. No children until 30 and 35. Married, no more than 2, no closer together than 3 years apart.
In your opinion, when is the African American child and adult in a state of good mental health?
Well, one can say that as long as we are under major attack by white supremacy and we don't understand that attack, we're not in a good state of mental health. And I think if we look at our condition, if we look at the number of children who are dropping out of school, the number of young people who are in the juvenile justice system, the number of people that are incarcerated, that these are signs that there's not maximal development of the black genetic and constitutional potential. We're under attack and we have not worked out how to defend and develop ourselves. But and we will not be in a state of optimal mental health until white supremacy is no longer here. But in the meantime, as we are helping to eliminate white supremacy and taking responsibility for our own maximum development, it is incumbent on parents to, number one, be mature parents. It means be old, no children having children. No overwhelming yourself with large numbers of children, you see, which is a continuation of the slavery phase of white supremacy where people are breeding and studying. And I say that breeding and studying means to bring people in the world to be interiorized, you see. And so we have to become consciously aware of that. At the same time that I say that the breeding and studying comes about when the white supremacy system is giving welfare payments. You see, I don't give you a good job. I don't let you advance on a job, but I keep giving you increments in a welfare check. You see, I say that is it's like a slave master. Hattie, if you produce another baby, I'm going to give you another little piece of fat back. You see, to work on my plantation. So we have to take control over that. Then we have to, as parents, as older black people, have to show models of positive self-image and self-concept, even though we don't see it on the television, even though we don't see it in magazines and newspapers and the movies, etc. And we have to learn those behaviors. For example, there are behaviors that I call exercises in black mental health and black self-respect. And some of these exercises came from the textbook of Victims of Racism by Neely Fuller. But stop name-calling one another, stop cursing one another, stop gossiping about one another, stop squabbling with one another, stop being discourteous and disrespectful to one another, stop fighting one another, stop killing one another, stop using and selling drugs to one another, stop throwing down trash where black people have to live, work, and play. Did I say stop stealing, stop robbing? Now, as I said, the pressure of the white supremacy dynamic that forces black people to think negatively about themselves and set up negative environmental conditions will produce these negative behaviors. You see, but that's just like somebody putting you in check on the other side of the door. So you have to learn the tactics and strategies, the behavioral tactics and strategies, you see, that will stop that from happening. So you're constantly on the offensive and the defense about preserving or evolving and developing a very positive image and concept of self. That's key. The second thing is to for black people in this state of siege of racism, white supremacy, is to continue to put a major emphasis on education. And I have been critical. I don't want to talk about another television program, but I don't like the program Sesame Street. I'll tell you why. I think that it was a program developed for so-called inner-city black Hispanic children. And so you have the background is garbage cans, and then you have this big silly goose. Now, if a program is supposed to be about education, I think it should be presented in a very serious manner. For example, if you look at, I don't know, South Carolina gets Mr. Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Rogers says, good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to go to an ice cream factory. Not a silly goose. You see, and a dumb big bird, and a whole lot of noise and creatures coming out of garbage cans. You see, we're going to go to an ice cream factory and we're going to see how ice cream is made. Now that's education for children, you see, who are going to have a responsible role in the society. And so I say consciously or subconsciously that the Sesame Street is like banned to education. Now somebody will say, well, they disagree. That happens to be my opinion. And I see it as conscious or subconscious thinking coming from the other side of the chessboard. But I think that to the extent that black people are able, that they should teach their children that education is very, very important, that you cannot ask anybody else to do and make perfect for you, that you must do it and develop it yourself, and you're not going to do it without an education. And I think that black children need to learn about the African past. You see, you have done a splendid job with your series, For My People, in the episodes that you have talking about ancient African history that black people are deprived of. You see, that is not taught anyplace that I know of. And it should be taught, just like I think that white children, if they are taught the history of their ancestors in Europe, fine. You see, but then the ancestry and the ancient history of all other people should also be taught. Not just when you were enslaved in 1863, you see, Abraham Lincoln emancipated you. That's not the history, you see, of African people who happen to be living here in America. We have the oldest history, and people in Europe went to Africa to learn years and years ago. You see, and that should be taught. If it's not taught in the school system, then black people have to teach it, whether they teach it in school, in churches, or whether they teach it at home. But this must be taught. And also, you have to understand the game that's on the table. You don't take somebody to the football field and stand them up and say, play, without telling them what the game is all about. You don't go to the chessboard without it being taught. What is the object of this game?
Which gets to my next question. You will hear many black parents complain that, and adults complain that the younger people don't know what racism is because it is more subtle than
more refined.
20 years ago. What should black children be told about white supremacy?
Everything. Absolutely everything. You see, but I think that the relationship between black and white people, Neely Fuller, I keep referring to him, I consider that he has done some very important work, in terms of understanding white supremacy, but he talks about the relationship between black and white people being tacky. You see, because there's not a lot of truth shared. A tacky relationship is 90% lies and 10% truth. You see, and at best, the relationship between black and white people are tacky. Meaning that there's no discussion about white supremacy, you see, that's lied about. And so, I mean, it's like a married couple, you see, where they align to each other as opposed to sharing truth. That a lot of lies go on, a lot of deceit goes on in the system of white supremacy. And so I think that black parents should tell their children everything, you see, but instead of, well, I don't want to tell the child because it really is so horrible and I don't want to think about it. You see, that's incorrect.
What does that produce in the child?
Well, just a lack of understanding.
Uh-huh.
Because you have the child standing at the chessboard and you don't tell them what the game is all about. You don't tell them the plays that are going to come from the other side of the board. So the child is in a state of, being checkmated, or the other side keeps saying check. And so the child just stands there. I can't play this game. I don't really know what's happening. As a matter of fact, I say that black people greet each other by saying what's happening because we don't know what's going on. And see, now is the time, before we enter the 21st century, for us to fully understand exactly and specifically what white supremacy is all about, and people at all ages should know.
What should black children be told about white supremacy?
Exactly what we're talking about here. You see, and more, that white supremacy is a system of behavior evolved by a tiny minority of people on the planet who are genetically receptive to the majority, and these behaviors that oppress and hold non-white people down are for the purpose of white genetic survival. These are very unjust behaviors, boys and girls, or children, you see. And we have been asking that these behaviors stop, but because they consider these behaviors to be survival necessity, they continue. So therefore, this is what we must do, you see. We must learn how to take ourselves very, very seriously. You see, we must learn how to respect ourselves. We must learn how to respect one another. You see, I say even respect white people. You see, but be aware, that's like if you're on opposite teams, baseball, basketball, football, you can respect the team that's playing against you, but know that that team is playing against you. You see, and that ultimately what we're talking about is establishing justice and peace on the planet. But this is like a war that's going on now. You see, and our responsibility is to bring justice to the planet Earth. You see, but it's going to be a very difficult struggle because the people on the other side are very, very much afraid. And so therefore they are doing some very, very destructive and negative things. We must be aware of that.
Y'all pull out this number fuller. Is everybody has one? Millie Fuller's victims of racism should practice in speech and action. We don't have one, there's one here.
Let's see what it looks like, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And
Now, what should black children be told about white supremacy versus racism?
To be told the truth, as we know it, as being how we first, our ancestors was taken from a country, Africa, brought over, unwillingly fighting, struggling for their lives, so they can know, they can understand that when they got here, they didn't have a choice. They were made to think, live, and breathe a certain way. So, That's just one thing I just
Should we tell the black child the game that's being played?
Yes,
Why?
just like she said, so they'll know how to deal with it when they do encounter it.
Now share with me something out of the two things that you wrote down out of this documentary that you would like to share.
One that I wrote, which she repeated the second time, the very beginning, where she said, which really stood out to me, no black male should become a father before 35. But at the beginning she said before 35, but then when she reiterated it later, she added 30 or 35. No more than 2 children, no less than 3 years apart. And it stood out to me because, of course, you know, looking at our culture, we see so many teenage pregnancies and then young adult pregnancies and marriages. And I think what she's saying gives our black males, especially, a chance to for success in life, because she also said some. Well, you said one or two things, but it kind of led into about on the job, you know, different things like that, kind of being kept down or that right. Right, different things like that. It kind of put there for the black male, I think, if they follow that path of waiting till later to have the children and spreading them out and not, you know, and just thinking wise, because it could be more than 2, but I just really think that that's a good way for them, something for them to strive for.
You know, she also meant that for the women too, because when I first heard that, I got black children, and all of them, the first few were like 6 years apart, but the last 2 were like 18 months. So when I first heard that, I said, well, I didn't know what to think, because when you think about our struggle and how many of our children are being killed and going to prison, if you have 3 and 2/3 of them are going to prison, another one's being killed in the street or moving to drugs, you lose that generation. So I'm having a tendency now that my children are grown to look at what she's saying and say, well, you know, I can see where she's coming from, but I'm not all the way there on that one.
I'm not either.
You know, because you know, I think it's we're in such dire straits. I understand the significance of waiting till you get older to do it.
Right. Yeah,
Now, you know, that part I understand, but what is the problem in that is that we're losing our children so fast. We're no longer the, you know, we were, let's say in the 60s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, we were considered the second largest population in the U.S. We're no longer the second largest population anymore. Our population hasn't increased from 1965. See, we got 35 million. There were 35 million of us then. So I tend to agree with her method, but I'm having a problem with how to implement it when our population isn't growing.
Right.
And it's steady on the decrease.
And I guess, and that's why I say, you know, the amount, I don't necessarily have to agree with, but I think that if all my children there, I have 3 and they're less than 2 years apart, but I think that sometimes if you just even look to strive for a plan similar to that,
Mm-hmm.
that you can pour more into those children, and then, like you said, we're losing them, but you may not lose as many of them. You know, like I see some of my friends, but not friends, I'm sorry, people that I knew from high school, and they had them back to back to back. And
Right.
you're right, and some of them are here or there, they've lost some children, you know, to different things, drugs or jail. But I think that if you strive to follow a plan similar to that, then you can maybe pour more into those, even if it's 5 of them or 6 of them. If you follow something similar, you can pour more into them that you may not lose them.
I think it's a worthy plan. I'm just concerned about, say for instance, if you got one child, and that child grows up, he needs brothers, sisters, cousins, folk that he can lean on. And so, and if your numbers are decreased, you know, you're not having anybody to lean on. So, and we're in a situation in this country where we need to be able to lean on somebody. You know, and after you get in your 50s, you begin to see the struggles of your past in a lot of ways. If you would have had someone who you could turn to or lean on, then you could have made better decisions. So, you know, as I said, I'm leaning towards what she's saying, but implementing it is problematic. But I like really what she's saying, you know, in terms of, you know, what we should be doing about racism, white supremacy. It's a strategy, it's a plan. You know, all of my children are grown. I want foster children. So because, you know, I was a foster child, so, you know, after I grew up and, you know, went into the world on my own, before I learned where my brothers and sisters were, I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, so, but, you know, there's power in numbers. You see, the fewer numbers you got dealing with, as I see, racism, white supremacy, the fewer that you have, the more the chances you will be subject to racism, white supremacy. That's my on that particular one. Someone else?
I thought it was interesting how she compared the Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I never looked at it that way. That was kind of
she's really a genius.
eye-opening.
Really, you know, something that we all need to sit and listen and not, you know, not only just read, because when you read, you're left to try to interpret what it is that you've read, and then your interpretation may not come out to what that person wrote. You see, you can come up with another one, but then you hear the author and the person articulate exactly what it is, then you can put your analysis and hers together, and then you can come up with, you know, a solution or even a better, as you say, strategy. And so, you know, when she talks about the survival unit, I tend to agree with her about the survival unit because we didn't have the elements to actually build what we were thinking was a family, but we were doing this thing without a conscious blueprint or black print. So as a result, we were just really surviving because economically, even though we make more money than our parents and grandparents, we're still going paycheck to paycheck. And so if you lose a job or a job moves, your survival is now, yes, right. You see, so, you know, but now, what she says about what we should tell the children is a hard, cold fact that what we have to do and what we need to do in order to deal with this white supremacy thing. We can't teach them that it doesn't matter, that it's over, that it's gone. because it's a system that's been in place since the 1500s, even before that. We won't just count 1500 because that was the first nacimientos or contract for black slaves by the Spaniards, so and the Portuguese. So from that time till now, this thing has been working. So it didn't stop because of emancipation. So listening to Dr. Wells is a wealth of information.
I have something to add to that. The problem with the black children watching TV programs. As a young child, I remember the Little Rascals, how they had what's his name, Ike and Alfalfa, and you know, how they had his hair in the TV.
Right.
It goes back to mine and me. He was the one that was up. The little black boy, what's his name? Buckwheat. He's always the one that was slowly talking, slowly. And the black boy, some people learn, taught how to talk. And he was always, everybody else, the little white kids were talking fast and, fluently. And they were very articulate. So that goes back today when I was listening to part one of that, Dr. West's name, that goes back to Little Rascals and cartoon programs.
But it is so incumbent that we know how to look at the television and know what we're looking at, and know that we're looking at racism, white supremacy, so that we can then be able to either articulate to the children or find some other way of affecting how they're accepting this racism, white supremacy. A lot of times we have to do it covertly. We have to bring forth that what it is without even letting them know before we actually tell them that this is what it is, because they will reject based on that how white supremacy has affected them. So it's very important to know, and there's no way around telling our children the truth, and then for ourselves, because this is information that I read it when I was 30, now 50, but from 30 to 50, I had never thought about the Little Rascals as racism, white supremacy, or any of the cartoons that we saw on how racism affects us when we saw the cartoons, ethnic notions. So, but we're learning the psychology of racism, and I think Dr. Wilson has given us an excellent solution. She's actually breaking it down to us. Chevron, what you wanted to share?
She said, continue to put a major stress on how important education is to our children. And that just makes me think about how a lot of, the boys and girls dropping out of high school, they don't have no future. You can't go far without an education now. You won't get anywhere.
And it's very education is the key. All of our scholars have said that if we are going to be able to do the justice, redemption, advancement of ourselves, and we develop our culture, we are going to have to get an education. But even more so, a specific, direct education. We need an education that, as she says, deals with our culture and represent our culture, define for us our culture. They need to be able to understand that the children, they actually speak a language of their own. Even though when they go to school, the Europeans have them stand in front of the class and talk Euro-American. But they need to know they have a culture. But one day at a time. So, Dr. Wilson, again, has so many things that she does. And go ahead. Go ahead.
One thing, Dr. Wilson brought to mind, well, right now, I know of a 5-generation family from the great-grandmother on to the grandchild. These parents, and it happened in my family too, okay, being honest. We might started at 17, 16, 17, 18, having children, and our children had children, maybe when they were 17. In some families, they had 5 or 6 generations. They were only like 16, 17, maybe 18 years apart. And this made, right now, what I'm thinking is a cycle has been imposed upon us to have kids at a young age because we didn't know about birth control or exactly what we should be doing to not have children. Our parents would say, don't go out and have sex or don't do this and don't do that. And we didn't really have the basic knowledge of what we should be doing. And so that left the unbroken cycle of these generations of families started having kids at 16 as teenagers.
Absolutely. But, the thing about the 30 years ago, actually 50 years ago, was it was still a extension from captivity. We really didn't see the amount of information we have today is eons over what they had 50 years ago, even 30 years ago, 20. You understand? There's so much information there now that we have access to in terms of our scholars, in terms of black scholars. I mean, they were writing, but you didn't have access to it because it wasn't in the library. It didn't come on the TV. It wasn't published. And if it was published, it couldn't get to the classroom. So what we knew about how to survive was the way that we did in captivity. And we're today still, in a lot of ways, under that cultural conditioning, to the point where people will argue up and down and say, no such thing as white racism, white supremacy, that it doesn't exist. You could get in a fight with someone trying to, explain to them, or you have to really pick your battles. And so when you want to present this topic, because racism was a holistic thing, was and is, and captivity was holistic, from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. That's the most obvious, but it was in the religion, it was in the food you ate, it was the way that you thought, is in your dreams. When you dreamed in that way. So to come out of that, to switch that, we need to find the scholars, read them, study them. And first of all, we need to undo the miseducation and how it affects us. And until we can do that, first of all, begin with ourselves, then it becomes problematic to go to the next person and say, well, look, this is it. You can, with a child that's 4 or 5 years old, you can hold their attention. But when you let them go and they go to the TV, that's another issue. So what Dr. Wilson talks about when she says you have to have tactics and strategies. You have to strategize how you're going to approach the person or the information, put the information out. And that's why documentaries are good. You want to be able to collect all of the information that you can get on documentaries about racism, white supremacy, and then you want to do it on all the topics you can get from black scholars. There's so many that has written in the fields of sociology, psychology, anthropology. Those fields have been accommodating our knowledge and our ability to write, but they really haven't done the justice, because that justice we have to get ourselves. No one can give you justice if you don't pursue it, you know. And so, how do you see, he said another one, how do you see racism, white supremacy? How do you see it? When you see it, how can you see it?
One way I see it, the way the government is run, the way the country is run, it's not as well, it is widespread, but it's not as prevalent as people think it is, but it is there. So I believe the white people of America, especially in the higher parts of government, they are planning, they have always planned and have probably will always have a way they want us to live and be. And this is why they fight so hard to keep themselves where they are, in the company that they are. And Republican Party and Democratic and both of them. Any part of the government, you'll find racism and white supremacy. And it's just, they don't want to change. They have been, this idea has been embedded in not just the white, us, like black people, have been embedded in our minds for, like you say, ions.
We have been victims of
To break away from that, it's going to take a lot of information and knowledge.
It does. It takes research, study, and you actually have to say undo your miseducation and then live it. You have to be cognizant of it, because it's just like when you want to go on a diet and the temptations are all about you. Before you know it, you're putting something in your mouth, or you're eating whatever it is that you said you wasn't going to eat, because it's so convenient that before you know it, if you're not conscious of it, you're doing it. And so you have to read it, study it, and know it. She says that it affects us in all 9 areas of our lives. This one right here, where reading this one here, where it says racism, white supremacy is the local, global power system and dynamic structure and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously, determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbols, formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people's activities. And then she says economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. How does it affect us in sex? See, that's something we have to think of. How does it affect us in that? I would have thought of the other one, but when I read that it affected us in sex, I didn't think.
Like the videos, symbolizing, like a Gucci mama, or, I mean, it's just depicting us as not worthy of anything other than putting us on the screen in swimsuits or nothing at all. And like in the politics, I agree with what she said, and I think it's more evident now than it has been in a long time in terms of the game being played, because the game now is the presidential election, and if we don't wake up, it won't happen again.
That's right. Politics, right?
Because they put out those subliminal messages and even obvious messages. And, some people that don't educate themselves, they'll believe whatever they hear or see on TV and make the decision that they want them to make.
Excellent analogy, for sure, right, indeed. It affects us in entertainment, what we like to look at, why we're looking at it, and even how they present it to us. In labor, to get a job. In order to get a job, racism, white supremacy affects us in such a degree that when you go to apply for the job, if you're not white, you might not get the job. We have thought, and I hear people on the radio, on talk shows, saying that doesn't exist anymore. But it does, because when you look at the unemployment statistics in terms of the country, and then you look at the unemployment statistics in terms of blacks, it's twice that of whites. So not just black and white, but the Europeans created a category called minority. So that meant that now it isn't just black against white, but it's black, white, and minority. And in this privileged distribution scale, anything lighter than black is more preferable. So, that's how it affects us when we go and looking for a job. And religion, because we all know about the white Jesus concept and so forth, but it's even more deeper than that. It's more than, it's just gotten to the point now where it's not as overt in terms of how white supremacy racism is working in the religious sector. So when we think about racism, white supremacy, and we're not just talking Christian, but even in the Muslims, the Arabs, and the other religions that have held our people in captivity. When you take a look at that, those religions are not religions that were the way that we worship the supreme being or God. They are now the way that we worship after being in captivity. The Arabs institutionalized slavery, and the Europeans internationalized it, according to Dr. John Clark.